Well, week 2 of the federal election campaign is done, and it was just as eventful as the first. We saw Donald Trump dominate things once again. Peter Dutton did quite the backflip on a number of his key policies that were not going down well with voters. He kicked a football into the head of a cameraman, which went viral online and was quite interesting to say the least. Anthony Albanese duelled with Peter Dutton in the first leaders debate, and he was questioned over whether he can stand up to President Donald Trump. This is the Snapshot podcast. We take a look at each week from the federal election campaign. My name's Josh Martin. I'm a federal political reporter with Channel 7, and it's good to talk to you again. Let's get right into it.
It's every leader.
Well, day 8 of the federal election campaign was Friday.
Hey mate, how are you? Good to see you.
And it was the first time that Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese came face to face during this campaign. They were in Western Sydney for a dialogue, a discussion with that part of Australia's leaders about the key infrastructure they need, the policies they want to see. And it was the first time we saw Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton shake hands and lock eyes since the election had been called just 8 days earlier. Now, Peter Dutton spent the day, he went to some service stations and he was talking about his gas policy. And if you cast your mind back to episode 1, Peter Dutton had been under pressure, the coalition had been under pressure to reveal the modelling for their gas plan, their plan to reserve a percentage of Australia's natural gas for use here in Australia. And Peter Dutton had been peppered with questions. How much will it save consumers? How much will it save businesses? And Friday was the first day he revealed how much it would potentially save, revealing it would save manufacturers about 15%.
Gas prices would have been 15% cheaper domestically.
Anthony Albanese, on the other hand, was in Western Sydney. He knows it's a region dominated by small businesses, mum and dad businesses, so he was talking about the instant asset write-off, making a commitment there. It's a tax write-off that's used by a lot of small businesses to purchase things like cars, or even smaller things like printers and paper, to knives and utensil if you run a kitchen. And Anthony Albanese made a promise there to voters.
We want people to invest. We want people to invest now.
Day 9 of the campaign was the day that AFL dominated the political campaign. Peter Dutton was in Darwin in the Northern Territory announcing a bit of funding for a local AFL club, and he was kicking the Sharon with some kids, kicking the AFL footy. When he got a little bit too accurate, one of his kicks landed on the head of Channel 10 cameraman Gaith Nadir, and
Got him.
Gaith suffered some injuries there, a bit of a cut to his head that had to be bandaged up. Peter Dutton apologised to Gaith. He offered to buy him a beer.
We'll get you beer this afternoon.
And he said sorry, but that was imagery, that was a story that went around the nation. And also on that day, the reason why Peter Dutton was in Darwin was to announce a big promise on the Port of Darwin.
An elected coalition government will move immediately to secure the Darwin port.
It's one of Australia's most strategic assets. It's a port that's used heavily by military, and it's in a key location in Darwin in northern Australia, near those trading routes go through there between Australia and Indonesia. Back in 2015, the Country Liberal Party of the Northern Territory had given a 99-year lease to Chinese company Landbridge. It's been quite controversial ever since, and it was rubber-stamped by the then Liberal National Federal Government. And it's been a thorn in the side of the coalition ever since. They regret that move, and now they've finally announced that they're going to rip it up.
The position has only deteriorated, and we've now seen, of course, the circumnavigating of our country by Chinese naval ships.
Anthony Albanese also promised to scrap the Port of Darwin lease if he wins the election. Quite cheekily, he found out about Peter Dutton's plans the afternoon before and got on ABC local radio in Darwin and promised to match the plan. Now, he spent Saturday, day 9 of the campaign in Longreach in Western Queensland, where there's been extensive flooding, extensive damage there in the outback, and he visited a sheep station with a local family. and made a number of promises, including to fix fencing, to drop more fodder for cattle and sheep that are out there isolated from the floods.
We will be with you. We will provide whatever support is necessary. I want to represent the whole country. That's my job.
It's quite interesting that Anthony Albanese was out there. It's not a Labor seat at all. It's held by Nationals leader David Little. Proud it's one of the safest seats in the country, Maranoa. But the Prime Minister was there making a point. He said that he wants to be a Prime Minister for everyone, and he was happy to take a day out of his campaign trail, not in a marginal seat, not in the Labor seat, not in the seat that he's trying to pick up, but to show that he is a Prime Minister for all Australians. That's the message he was trying to deliver. Day 10 of the campaign, the Sunday, was all about big rallies, showing you've got lots of support. Obviously, on the weekend, people are off work and they can attend a political rally. Anthony Albanese was in Brisbane, where he was treated like a bit of a rock star. He walked in with his fiancée, Jodie Hayden, to the cheers of the crowd. His Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, was there. Former Premiers Anastasia Palaszczuk and Stephen Miles were there. The whole kit and caboodle. It was a big display of unity and support from the Labor movement in Queensland. People were holding up placards with Albo written on them. It was quite an impressive display. And Anthony Albanese used the rally to announce his plan for cheaper batteries. It's a more than $2 billion scheme that Labor will introduce if it wins the election. It will knock 30% off the price of home batteries. Only 1 in 40 Australians has a home battery that stores energy from solar panels. A lot of Australians have solar panels, but they don't have the batteries. Why? They're so expensive. And even with Anthony Albanese's plan, there'll still be a fair bit of money. Anthony Albanese's plan might knock about $4,000 off the price. There'll still be about $8,000 to install one of these batteries. The Labor Party is promising that it will reduce power prices and running costs by about $1,000 a year for households that do this.
Today, in the Sunshine State, we're taking the next step on rooftop solar.
Peter Dutton also held a rally on day 10, the Sunday. He was in Tasmania and he was also in Melbourne. Earlier in the day, meeting with some property developers, talking about the cost of housing and immigration. Now, he announced that he wants to cut the number of international students coming to Australia by 30,000 compared to what Labor's proposing to do, with a 25% ongoing reduction. He's doing this because he says that international students are taking up too much housing, they're driving up the rents and costs for Australians, making it harder for people to put down a deposit. It's controversial. Some people disagree with him, saying he's unfairly targeting students, but it's a popular policy because we are in a housing crisis and we have had 1 million migrants arrive in Australia in the last 2 years.
I want to be the Prime Minister that restores the dream of home ownership.
Their work from home policy for public servants just wasn't popular at all. Peter Dutton and Shadow Finance Minister Jane Hume had announced a plan for work from home to end for public servants. They wanted to send public servants back into the office 5 days a week. But the Labor Party had cleverly used this policy to suggest that Peter Dutton wanted to scrap work from home rights for all Australian workers. That wasn't Peter Dutton's plan, but Anthony Albanese argued that the culture of the public service sets standards for private jobs and private business. The polling and the reaction to the policy had got so bad that on Monday, during the campaign, Peter Dutton had to scrap the plan. He apologised profusely from morning TV, radio interviews, press conference throughout the day. He needed to scrap this plan. He was losing support with women, and particularly in a number of marginal seats he was chasing, so he had to scrap the plan. But the Prime Minister made sure he stuck the knife in and reminded Australians that Peter Dutton had only revealed this plan a month or two earlier.
I've apologised for the decision that we took in relation to work from home. We got it wrong. As I say, we made a mistake in relation to the work from home policy. We've apologised for it.
He now wants to pretend that that policy hasn't existed.
So that was the highlights from day 11, the Monday, when everything went drastically wrong for Peter Dutton. On day 12, the Tuesday, the Prime Minister was back in his electorate in the seat of Graindler, which he's held for many years. And he was in Ashfield in a headspace where he announced a $1 billion package for mental health, about 100 new clinics funded by the government for youth and for adults. And it was quite a popular policy. Peter Dutton's announced a similar policy and actually said that day that it's good to see that both the major parties are putting in roughly the same amount of money for mental health. Obviously, it's a big problem in Australia. It's been exacerbated by things like the COVID pandemic. So both parties putting a major emphasis on mental health. But we have seen many protesters during this campaign, and another one showed up at the Prime Minister's press conference in Ashfield in Sydney's inner west. A rising tide protester who was screaming about coal and gas projects, claiming that they are affecting her mental health and the mental health of people her age.
You say you care about young people, and yet since getting elected, 33 new coal and gas projects. You are condemning young people like me to a lifetime of climate disasters. Of course, we have poor mental health issues. You said that you would end the climate war.
How did you find the press conference?
No comment.
How'd you get in?
I was walking past.
Peter Dutton, on the other hand, really wanted to shift the debate to the economy. Donald Trump's tariffs had taken effect and billions of dollars had been wiped off the share market on the Monday. I think it was over $100 billion had been wiped off the Australian Stock Exchange. Peter Dutton said that there was an incoming recession under Labor. He said that he and the coalition would be better economic managers, really trying to emphasise the economy and bring that in as a major issue. The risk for Peter Dutton is that every time he talks about the economy going wrong, and especially under Donald Trump, is that Anthony Albanese then goes and compares Peter Dutton to Donald Trump. He says his cuts to the public service and to government spending are Trump-like, and he says that some of his other policies are like Trump. He runs a scare campaign that Peter Dutton wants an American-style healthcare, an American-style government. Peter Dutton's refuting that, but it is sticking. It's a clever attack line by Anthony Albanese, and Peter Dutton's doing all he can to counter that.
Is Australia heading into recession?
Well, it is under Labor.
On day 13 of the campaign, the Wednesday, the emphasis was back on gas and energy from Peter Dutton. He toured the BlueScope factory in Western Sydney in the seat of McMahon, held by Energy Minister Chris Bowen. It's where BlueScope makes a lot of its colour-bond roof. And Peter Dutton wanted to emphasise the fact that manufacturing's under threat in Australia. He released more modelling on his gas, suggesting that prices will come down for manufacturers by about 15%. He said that domestic gas prices would come down by about 7% for Australian households, and that overall energy prices would come down by 3% under his domestic gas reserve policy. The gas producers themselves have disputed this and said that Dutton's plan might actually mean less gas in the system, but Peter Dutton says he's not out there to please gas producers, he's out there to please Australian households and to get their energy bills down.
Our gas plan is about getting Australian gas for Australians. That will bring the price down if we bring more supply.
Anthony Albanese went on the attack, saying that Peter Dutton's gaslighting Australians. He was saying that the Liberal leader's plan is a ruse to disguise his long-term plans for nuclear, and Anthony Albanese claims that will be expensive in the long run, and that talking about gas in the short term is disingenuous by Peter Dutton. But it is a bit of a sore spot for Anthony Albanese, because before the 2022 election and during the 2022 election, even after the 2022 election, Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen promised that power prices would drop by $275, and that did not happen. Prices shot up by $1,300.
Well, the only gas policy that the coalition have is gaslighting the Australian public.
Day 14 of the campaign, the Thursday, sort of started where the week 2 began. Donald Trump was the main theme. We'd seen Donald Trump backflip on his tariffs plan. Instead of applying in all these big numbers to a lot of countries, he said for most countries this is going to be 10%, and for China he's going to hike the tariffs. He's really going after China. But that presented a bit of a problem for Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton. The Labor leader and the Liberal leader both know that China is our #1 trading partner, and they both know that the United States is our number one military and security partner. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place when mum and dad start fighting with each other, when the USA and China start going head to head in a trade war. That's where we look like we're heading. Anthony Albanese said he could handle Donald Trump and he'll be a cool head. He was up in Cairns on the Great Barrier Reef, a seat he believes he can win, the seat of Leichhardt, and he was saying that he'll be able to handle Donald Trump.
You have to be an adult, not dial it up to 11 at every opportunity.
Peter Dutton, on the other hand, was in Melbourne. That's where he thinks he can pick up seats. There's a lot of anger about the state government, and he too was asked about President Trump and his tariffs. And Peter Dutton said that Anthony Albanese is weak. He said that bullies, referring to Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, don't like weak people. They walk over weak people, and he was suggesting that Anthony Albanese will be walked over by China and walked over by the United States, and that Australia needs to elect a tough leader like himself. Again, Anthony Albanese made comparisons to Donald Trump, suggesting that he will implement a US-style healthcare system here in Australia. So it's this dueling narrative. Peter Dutton saying, I'm the strong man, I'm the guy that can handle the US, I'm the guy that can handle the tough times. The Liberal Party is the party of economic management. And on the other hand, Labor and Anthony Albanese are saying, we're going to be calm and relaxed, Peter Dutton's. So that's the dueling narratives, and what lands with voters will be interesting to see who's cutting through with their messaging on President Trump and his tariffs.
I will work with whoever the American president is. I will deal with whatever comes at our country.
So that was it, week 2 of the campaign, another busy week, and only 3 weeks to go until polling day. Australians will have to vote on May 3, Saturday, May 3, and that night we should find out who's won. We may not, though. It may be a hung parliament, and so we will find out on Saturday, May 3, who has won. Up until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast. We will keep telling you what's happening, who the key players are, what the key policies are, and what the key moments are in this election. This has been another week of Snapshot. My name's Josh Martin, political reporter with Channel 7. It's been great to speak with you again, and I'll enjoy catching up with you next week to recap week 3 of the federal election.